That's the feeling we've all had. How new shoes would make you glad, but the best time you recall when you wore no shoes at all. Back the days.
So last night I was on YouTube and I stumbled upon this video and it was a debate between Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin that was done in like 1987.
Rebelled from the political movement in the 1970s, and that's one of the things.
But I guess they must have done a tour and done these debates, you know, traveling from university to university, something like that. If you're not familiar with who Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin are, they were both activists during the anti-war movement, Vietnam anti-war movement in the late 60s. And so they were big voices back then. They were sort of these radicals who predicted and thought that, like a lot of people did at that time, young people, that there was going to be a revolution in the United States, and that everything would be overturned and changed for the better. But obviously that didn't happen, and they went on to take very different paths. And so Abbie Hoffman continued to be this radical activist who worked outside the system and tried to, you know, fight against corporations polluting, against our apartheid in South Africa, so causes like that. And then Jerry Rubin basically became a wealthy businessman. And it's interesting how both of them saw the future at this time in 1987, and to have the knowledge of their future now and look back and hear them talking about what they thought would happen in the world and how they thought it would change. Basically, Abbie Hoffman had this view of, like, he never really lost his passion as an activist and continued to do that in his life up until his death, only a couple of years after this video. But Jerry Rubin, like I said, became a wealthy businessman. He predicted and thought that there was going to be a change where all these people who were in the counterculture, anti-war movement, and wanted to see all these changes when the revolution didn't happen, he saw that they should get into the system and change it from within. And so that's what he thought he was doing. I think it was also kind of delusional because it justified his desire to have the trappings of affluence. And so it was probably some kind of rationale or justification for the way that he wanted to live. But he still talked in this debate about foreseeing this great change happening. He thought that when the baby boomers came into their own and came into power and were in positions of power in the world, that they would use their position to change the world for the better. It's just, like I said, it's interesting to look back on this debate. Like, I would definitely recommend watching it because you kind of get a sense of where the pop culture was and where these activist movements were back then, and kind of try to relate them to what's going on now. It seems like a lot of things don't ever change. The things that Abbie Hoffman was advocating for, and those changes are still the same things that haven't been done today that need to be done. And he was talking about disparity of wealth, and today the disparity of wealth in our country is like greater than it's been in like 60 to 80 years or something. So things have gotten a lot worse pretty much in every way since the time of this video. But in this debate, it's also interesting to look at these two different philosophies. Like Abbie Hoffman talks about how he went on to raise a family, and he, had a VCR. He had like some of these basic like middle class luxuries, but he wanted to just have enough to have a good life for his family. Whereas Jerry Rubin sort of got dollar signs in his eyes and wanted to go after this wealth because he saw wealth as being power, and then having power as being the key to changing the world, which is delusional in the sense that in order to get power in that way and get money, you have to destroy the world. I mean, like, that's kind of the way that it works. In order to get wealth and power, you have to destroy the environment and you have to exploit people, because that's just the way that we create wealth in our economy. And what I think is particularly interesting is Jerry Rubin had this very capitalistic view of how the world would change and how these business people, progressive business people, would work within the system and completely change everything around and solve all these problems. And it was just a pipe dream, because capitalism does not do that. And now we can have the knowledge of looking back and saying, wow, he was just completely wrong. Everything that he talked about and thought would happen did not happen in any way. And in fact, I think that most of the baby boomers ended up sort of getting lured into this elitist system and drawn into this affluent lifestyle, and they pretty much tossed their values out the window. I think a lot of them did sort of like check out and just go back to the land, or they just continued to live their lives and try to make change on a small scale, like Abbie Hoffman, and had their own victories in their lives. But like, by and large, most people, most of the baby boomers just ended up, filling in their father's shoes. The people that they criticized became basically the devils that they had criticized when they were, in their idealistic late teens and early 20s. It's interesting to look at these two different philosophies, like Abbie Hoffman's philosophy for working outside the system and trying to change it from outside through activism, and then Jerry Rubin's wanting to work within the system. But here at Dancing Rabbit, I feel like what we're doing is completely rebuilding the system for a different purpose. We're not trying to change it from without, and we're not trying to change it from within. We're trying to ignore that system and create our own unique system that's based on principles of sustainability. It's not trying to raise a family and have a middle-class lifestyle. It's trying to reduce your consumption as much as possible. It's getting off fossil fuels, not driving a car, all these things that are not typical mainstream lifestyles. It's not like taking on a certain cause. It's more like changing your lifestyle and getting back to the basics, so you don't have to protest an oil company. You eliminate your dependence on oil so that those companies don't have any power. I mean, you can protest the oil company in addition to that, but really the thing that gives them their power is people buying the oil. Anyways, I just thought I'd mention that. It was interesting. I'd recommend watching it just to get some perspective. I think people these days never learn about the 60s anti-war movement. They don't even know who these people were, Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, and both of them died pretty shortly after this video was made. Jerry Rubin died in 1994 when he was supposedly walking across the street in front of his penthouse apartment, and he got hit by a car, and then 2 weeks later died of a heart attack in the hospital. But it's kind of sadder for Abbie Hoffman. He struggled with depression and he ended up killing himself. And it's just looking at how much passion he had in this video. It's just really sad that he struggled with this mental health and this mental disability. What he could have gone on to, how he could have gone on to influence people even more for the rest of his life.